Good morning, good morning, good morning, you guys. I'm going to start it off. Usually I wait. You might see me be a little bit distracted as I continue to let people in, but I really wanted to get this conversation started because not only is it a popular topic, but yeah, on the panel are some of the people that I really enjoy most from my time here at Delaware State University. One disclaimer that I wanted to make was is that when we talk about DEI, there are various areas of DEI, right? So it's not just it could be disability, um, it could be a lot of different things. But for this conversation, we are really owning in on, of course, race, right? Because this is a historically black college and university, and also how this is designed is to give students a head start on what is to come before them once they leave us and graduate and then enter into the workforce. And so I felt as though I have some really strong professionals that aren't even in entry level positions anymore, but that are in their career and they can speak to those types of experiences that they've had, as well as some of the challenges that they might have had and or conquered and or that they might practice now that some of them are definitely in supervisory roles. Um, so I'm gonna go ahead with another. Oh, in your chat, in the chat box, there's actually the survey link. The survey link actually is what you guys would end up using to for attendance to show that you attended, whether you're a scholar, whether you are here for university seminar. Also, scholars, I do want to put it out there that you should be on camera. So we always want to make sure that we're on camera. We know why, and yeah, I'm gonna leave it like that. And also in the chat are all of the links. So you'll throughout this discussion, there'll be references to different articles. There'll be different resources that you can actually utilize, and they will all be in they'll all be in the chat for you, as well as the first link at the top is a survey link. We all know that with the survey link, it opens at 11:50 and it closes at 12:30. Something that we did start, thank you to Miss Letice Hickson and one of the scholars, is after the show. And so a lot of times I do try to get you guys out of here by 11:50, 12 o'clock at the latest. But actually, when I was in Atlanta at a conference, I usually catch up with panelists afterwards. And we just kept on rolling, and students just kept on asking questions, and it was a really good experience. So I said, to myself, I want to offer that to all students. If you have to go to class, that's fine. If you want to stick around for after the show, which is usually just till 12:15, and you might have more questions of the panelists, then definitely go ahead and do that. The drawing winner from the first, let me move this up here. The drawing winner from the first student engagement forum, which was on resume writing last week, is Aneris Albello Torres, biology major from Dover, Delaware. Also, our next forum is actually on September 20th from 11 to 12 during your common hour. It's going to be geared to faculty takes on funding graduate school tips. And so we have various faculty that are here from Del State, as well as one from North Carolina A&T. And they're going to really speak to their experience as being a student and vying for graduate school funding, as well as how they are now a faculty. And faculty are usually the ones that write grants and can get support to support graduate students within their work. And so they actually select graduate students. Some people might say, I'm a freshman, sophomore, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, this gives you the opportunity to be exposed to what you're up against when it comes time to actually graduate and go off to graduate school. So that is pretty much it for reminders. And we're going to go into introductions. So, Jordan, can you just say your name, the year that you graduated from Del State, your major, hometown, title, and employer.
Good morning, everybody. Hope you can hear me well. How are you? My name is Jordan Evelyn. I graduated back in 2015. My major was pre-veterinarian science. I'm from Jersey City, New Jersey. My title now is Zone Marketing Sales Manager, and I work with True Green Lawn Care Company.
Okay. Next, Rochelle Purnell.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Rochelle Purnell. I am part of the class of 2015 as well. My major was agribusiness. I am from little town of Lincoln, Delaware, and currently I am a logistics management specialist with NAVSEA that falls under the U.S. Department of the Navy.
And next, we have Lashida Brooks.
Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone's having a great day. Again, my name is Lashida Brooks. I graduated in 2017. I did animal and poultry science. I'm from Philadelphia, PA. Currently, I am the food safety supervisor of Clemens Food Group.
Wow. Before there is one more panelist. This is so embarrassing, but I've been up since 6 a.m. and there's five. Latisse, who am I missing? Rochelle, you would know because I didn't want to go off screen to look.
Oh, Jania.
Janae's on.
Okay, I was gonna say, man, I apologize. When I say I've been up since 6, worked out, ran around, oh, it has been really, really different. So, okay, Jania, I'm sorry. And honestly, you know why? Because usually we talk beforehand, but you've been so quiet when I was talking to everybody else. So, nothing wrong with that. But I sincerely apologize because you were extremely important to this conversation.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Um, well, my name is Jania King. I graduated in 2019 with a bachelor's degree in natural resources with a concentration in environmental science. I'm from Prince George's County, Maryland, and I am the Senior Plant Health Safeguard Specialist here at the Port of Wilmington, working for the United States Department of Agriculture, APHIS, PPQ.
Okay. And Miss Latisse Hickson.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Latisse Hickson. I am the class of 2013. I was a textiles and apparel studies major, and I had a minor in international marketing. I am the global senior marketing manager for LEAD, which is an initiative, a part of the Foot Locker Inc. Company.
Okay. So just to dive right in, for me, the premise of this discussion, I ended up coming across an article on CNN, and they talked about 2/3 of Black Americans say that the recent increase focus on race and racial inequality in the U.S. has not led to changes that are improving the lives of Black people, according to a new report by Pew Research Center. And then when you think back, unlike in September of 2020, a majority of Black adults, 56%, felt the added attention to issues of race inequality following George Floyd's murder would lead to changes that improved the lives of Black people. And then last, also in the article, as far as the survey, 65% of adults say that such changes haven't materialized. Just 13% see it extremely or very likely that Black people in the US will achieve equality with little variation in that figure by age, gender, region, or educational level. And so for me, I could completely understand what they came up and why they came up with it. But then I also think about myself professionally and personally. So the personal side of me definitely could understand, but then the professional side of me, seeing as though I serve at a HBCU, I realized that the results that I came up with can actually be a little skewed or biased, right? Because I'm not necessarily in a general population as far as the workforce. And so my next thought was, wait, you know who would know best would be alum that are young in their career and they have gone through this while as far as being in the workforce during this time period. And so that's why I decided to ask some alum to come back. And so my question now is for each alum actually is, would you agree or disagree with the results found in the CNN article? Why or why not? And Jordan, can you go first?
No biggie. All right, everybody. So, what I agree with what I see in the article, I would, and I'm gonna just take it from a professional standpoint. When I joined this company back in 2016, I joined on this team of 25 people. There's only me and one other black man on the team. Out of the 7 managers in my branch, there was only one uh, man named Alex who is Puerto Rican. Everybody else was a white male. And that was back in 2016. And now that we're in 2022, it still seems to be the same within my company. We're an equal opportunity company, but I don't actually really see um, faces that look like me more often than not. So I agree with it just from coming to work every day. I went from New Jersey to Pennsylvania to Virginia. Now I live in Washington, D.C. And out of those 4 locations, that has not changed. I will say now, out of the 13 managers in my region, 3 of us look the same. Everybody else is a white male. So I would agree with the article.
Okay. And Lashida, what do you think?
I definitely agree that there's just not the visibility of Black and Brown people in places of power as it relates to Clemens. I think that my company is a great company to work for. However, most of the operational staff are Black and Brown people, and then as you move up, the representation is not there. So yeah, definitely agree.
Rochelle?
So I would say I agree with this article. When I think about the standpoint of the issues of race inequality for Black and Brown people, I think about how those conversations start, um, but then somewhere they trickle off. And that's with respect to other things that were going on during the time of George Floyd, like the pandemic, mental health issues, supply chain issues, all of those things that we were facing at one time. However, I think that all those issues got a lot of attention, but when it came to the issues of race for Black people in the United States, that somehow trickled off. And I think that it's a common culture in this country that, you know, they give those conversations attention as long as we're keeping the pressure and the momentum and making a stink, if you will, about it. But I think that the moment that we let up, those conversations stop. And I think that the mindset is we'll just continue to feed them until they stop talking about it. Then we'll let it go and we'll focus on everything else that deserves our attention.
Latisse?
All right, I'm gonna have a little long-winded answer this morning because I'm kind of on both sides of this, right? Similar to you, Dr. Meredith. I looked at it from a perspective of personal and professional, right? My personal life, I completely agree, right? If you look at our world that we live in today, there are still a ton of systematic changes that need to happen for our community in order for us to feel that we have equality in the world that we live in, right? So, 1,000% agree. But on the other side of the coin, in the professional world that I'm in, I was actually or my company, excuse me, was one of those companies that actually made that decision or that commitment to supporting the Black community. My role specifically now actually is centered around only supporting the Black community overall, right?
Mhm.
The LEAD initiative stands for Leading Education and Economic Development. We break it out into 2 different pillars in which I literally everything, all Black everything. That's the only thing I focus on. From brands that we're bringing into our stores to scholarships that are being given out in partnership with the UNCF to internships. Our frontline employee and workers, which we're going to kind of get into in the slide, are pretty much 87% Black. And secondary to that is the Latinx community. So we've created internships that are directly affecting our employees that are in the stores that they can get acclimated into the corporate world. In addition to grants and education, the list goes on, right? So I see it from that sense of we raised our hand and said, hey, there is clearly, as a corporation, there's clearly a huge issue specifically in the community that we serve the most to. Our lead's positioning is a very bold statement, is Foot Locker's commitment to invest in, amplify, empower the Black community that has been pivotal to sneaker culture, right? Majority of our paychecks are coming from communities that look like me, right? So that was Foot Locker's Inc. like stance in that sense. Now I'm going to say this. And back in 2020, when George Floyd was murdered, you saw commitments from corporations just like mine across the globe. And I read an article of $50 billion were committed to the Black community. But as of today, only 250 million of that has actually been committed and actually spent to our community. Right?
Wait, because you just hit my nerve. Just to add to that, because that was going to be one of the testimonies that I had in my role. I really never saw myself as having to be a DEI professional until I was offered opportunities outside of the institution. And all I want to say is that I watch and I still watch, and I'm still very, very curious to know that if you go to higher education jobs, chief diversity officer is always available, always available.
Yep.
And I said to myself, I said, okay, now I get it. If it's always available, we can always say that we're working on it. But if it's always available, then we're really not employing the director underneath the chief, the associate director, the secretaries, the specialists. So I totally get what you're saying. But go ahead. But I just have to say that.
Yeah, no, and you hit it right on the nail, right? So for me, on the professional side, looking at the industry as a whole, there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. Yeah, the companies around the world have committed 50 billion, but only 250 million has actually been spent. These dollars have actually gone somewhere that represents communities that we all live in, right? So for me, I agree with this again, in a sense, where it's like, these things are happening, right? And there are opportunities being created for our communities, but we have to be aware of them, and then on top of that, have the education to know where to search, how to actually get it, and and hope all is well, and that we fall into those categories to get it, right? Which has always been the case for our community, but now there's more of them in the world from all of these different businesses that actually acted on their word. So it is better in a sense in that way, right? But on the other side of the coin, it's like, is everyone being genuine in their commitment? Are we spending the dollars, or are they just sitting in a bucket of money that hasn't necessarily been spent yet? And we're gonna keep holding it there until the conversation has died down. So for my personal experience with my personal company, my experience is slightly different in the sense that my company did start to act on it. To this date, we've spent 21 million of our commitment in the last 2 years, right? And that's across all of those different categories that I've seen. But that's to our external consumer. When we talk about, internally, I'll follow up with some of those different elements.
So, my question also, I'd love to hear from Miss Jania King. Do you agree with this or not, and why or why not? Jania?
We can't hear you, Jania.
Sorry, I forgot to take the mute off. I was just basically saying I really agree with what all of the panelists have said. I just basically, just to keep it short and sweet, I feel like a lot of organizations like to say, just pacify the community. Like they're gonna say anything to simmer us down. We have we have the largest spending power, so of course they don't want to get canceled or anything like that. So they're gonna say what they think we, or what they know we want to hear through market research and everything. And then in order for it to be a real change, it's going to have to be a cultural change. It's going to have to not just be trainings. It's going to have to be disciplinary actions. It's going to have to be incentives for people to be inclusive, for its supervisors to be inclusive, and just like I said, disciplinary actions for when they're not. If as an intern, I've experienced discrimination, and I actually was on the receiving end of the discrimination, but I got the complaint against me. But when it was time for when I was made to feel uncomfortable, it just wasn't pursued with the same vigor, if that makes sense. So we can have as many trainings or whatever you can donate as much money, do as much internships, whatever the case may be. But if the culture from the top to the bottom is not inclusivity, equity, diversity, and that is being backed by policy, incentives, and disciplinary actions, then it's not really, I think we're just going to be stuck in the same cycle, in my opinion.
So, and sorry, I was trying to cut you off, Miss King, because that's going to come next, and not next, but towards the end. And yeah, I like your conviction, and I always love your delivery. But my thing is this, is that the number one way that we can always tell, because Lashida had a really good point when she said, as far as power, things keep on slipping through. So that's how we know that there's no power at the top. The Dove commercial would have also been some glitches that have just happened recently or within the last 2 years with companies. Of course, I can't think of them right now on the spot, but
H&M.
You said H&M. Was there any other ones?
Yeah, Gucci, Montclair, because we like high fashion. That's what our community does, right? With teaching us, I have a couple friends that know what teaching all my friends, Isaiah McCoy, Rashard, a lot of our people. We like that high fashion. We love sneakers. A lot of these companies aren't held accountable for when they do these things. We get angry, right? And it lasts with some of us for a while, right? And then I could be completely honest. I've been angry, and then in convenience, lost that anger to make sure I had something for that night or had something for that weekend. And then you go back to these same brands who you are chastising when they make these mistakes. So responsibility comes back on us as well. But yeah, I would say some brands make they've made some mistakes, and it's up to not only them but for us to hold them accountable and actually stick to that, right?
Yeah, and to piggyback off of Jordan, if you even look at the brands that he called out, even if you look at brands like Adidas, if we're been paying attention to what Kanye's rants has been going on, although he's ranting, he's being 1,000% honest. I know personally, I've seen this happen so many different times when major brands bring in partners that are celebrities or have some level of influence. They take their ideas and then they make dupes of them and sell them in line, and then that particular person doesn't get any credit. But you brought this individual in for that diversity or their following to support your particular brand, but you're not doing them right. So it just happens so many different ways, systematically, and until to your point, until it happens from top down or left, right, however you want to see it, all the way across the board, it has to be in your company's DNA to want to make that change.
So, Rochelle, what do you feel some employers are still missing in the overall DEI movement? And I'm asking you this because you have Dr. Rochelle Future. We actually met. I was in the car. We were talking about some of it was a project that you're working on, and it was centered around diversity. So I really am curious.
Yeah, so I think that Jania and Latrice both have sort of touched on this, but I think one of the major things is, that sense of being genuine as well as intentionality. You got to be intentional with whatever it is that you're saying or that you're doing. If you're committing to something, commit to it and mean it and follow through with it continuously. I think that a lot of, like we said before, a lot of conversations happen, a lot of talk happens, but then when it comes time for the action, that's where a lot of managers and supervisors start to lack or sort of fall to the wayside. I think that there also has to be this understanding that racial anxiety is real. You
Mm.
know, that feeling of feeling like I'm coming into a space and I'm a little bit afraid or apprehensive about, you know, interacting with people who don't look like me because I'm afraid to be perceived in a certain way, or I'm afraid that I'm going to be discriminated against. And it's the same for white people. You know, white people sometimes may keep the conversation short because they're afraid that they're not going to be seen as an ally, or that they might say something that can be taken as a microaggression or things of that nature. And so I think that that's something that managers have to really be intentional about addressing. You've got to acknowledge that, for one, racial anxiety is real. And then you've got to have the conversations that are necessary to relieve some of those anxieties to move forward.
And you know what you're saying is definitely true, right? Because, um, well, I'm just gonna say it. I think the hardest minority in the United States is definitely the black male. And I'm not just saying it just because I am one, but just for example, like I went to Dallas, and of course I'm flying on a plane, and of course people change up, right? Different regions. I'm still thinking, oh, I'm up north. Well, coming back home, a lady, she sat next to me, and when she sat down, she did this like look, and I'm thinking, well, no, you chose to sit next to me. And then it was crazy to me because her friend that was sitting next to her was Hispanic. And so I'm like, why all of that angst and push? And so she hadn't heard me speak or anything else like that. And so the lady asked me if I wanted something to drink. And then once I started speaking and coming across, then all of a sudden she wanted to like, interact with me. And I'm thinking, well, now I already know who you are, so it's definitely too late. Um, so Lashida, what about you? When you mention that as far as power, what do you think some employers might be missing when it comes to DEI?
I really think that it just comes from a lack of understanding that just because you say something doesn't mean it's good, right? Like they think that they say, oh, well, we involve Black people, we have Black people in positions of power, but you have one person that represents, 50% of the workforce.
Hmm.
So I think it's really just a lack of understanding about that. We just don't need words, we need actions, we need representation. And
And
that's really
also,
gonna
hmm,
go ahead.
sorry. Now I think I'm starting to get excited about this topic because, uh, my stance has always been that people are people. You know, bad people are bad people. Like for me, I've had always a mixed bag of friends, colleagues, and so what I'm getting at is sometimes, like how you just said, you might have one African American at the top. Well, like minds are like minds, right? So I can be like-minded like you, but still not have your same skin tone. And that could also be a reason why things aren't moving as well. But moving into Black employees, definitely seek greater equity, inclusion, and belonging. And this is something that I ran across as well. It popped up. And so, according to a recent The Fabric of Belonging report from Bain, a global management consulting firm, less than 25% of Black employees feel included at the office. Despite the advances being made over the past few years, the data is clear. Too many Black workers remain stuck at the bottom of their organizations. 36% of Black workers are in the frontline roles, the highest percentage of any racial group, and starkly higher than white workers. Even more alarming, 21% of Black workers are in lower income frontline roles that pay less than $30,000 per year. Black people also are much less likely to hold middle management and senior positions. So, my question now is, when you guys assimilated to the corporate culture from college, in just a few words, how would you describe going from an HBCU environment to a less diverse environment? Jania?
Um, so I would say I know you said a few words, but I feel like I can't say
No,
a
but
few.
wait, Jania, let me say this real clear. Because it just came to me also. Like something was just like, slow down. You're gonna ruin the conversation. So we have till after the show. You got me? So we are just gonna continue to flow, and students know what time the survey start. It'll start. And so yeah, you guys don't have to rush your answers and anything else like that. You got me?
perfect.
Yeah, it won't feel natural, not to me anyway.
So essentially, what I'm from the DMV. So I honestly had a very rich Black experience in my upbringing. I honestly did not want to go to a HBCU because just like Miss Rochelle had mentioned, I had a overwhelming anxiety about being around um like white people because I only grew up with Black people. I never experienced racism. You know, we were taught about Martin Luther King and everything, but I never experienced it. I was scared of it. To each his own. But I went to HBCU. Thankfully, my mother is very open to me. So, and I watched Scandal. I don't know if anybody watched Scandal, but her father always told her, "You have to be for what did I tell you, Olivia? You know, you have to be 4 times better as them just to be seen as equal." And my mother, like, you know, solidified that with me as well. So I kind of understood that. And through my internships, I seen it in real life. Like I was able to experience it. Like, oh, I had to get a 4.0 to get this internship. And then some of the majority was like, oh, I barely am passing and I'm here. And I was just like, oh, wow, this is crazy. Like, this is real life experiences. So by the time I got into my actual position, I had already had a wealth of real world experience dealing with how to code switch, dealing with microaggressions, dealing with um you know the stereotypes, people just automatically thinking that you're uneducated or you don't know how to communicate or you know you're standoffish or whatever the case may be. And so by the time I graduated, I didn't really have that much, you know, angst about it because I had so much experience. So my advice would just be for anyone who has an intern, who hasn't, like, just do your best to get as much real world experience because although college and the class is important, it is the real world experience that prepares you for these transitions and so on. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you. And Lashida, you know, we kind of lost touch, but I remember when you left and you went to Auburn. So I'm curious to know, uh, your transition from like Auburn to Clemens.
Yep, so I definitely resonate so much with what Jania just said. I originally didn't want to go to an HBCU because, from Philadelphia, Germantown area, very much so involved in the Black community, and I just wanted something else. And so after Dell State, I went to Auburn, which is definitely predominantly white institution in Auburn, Alabama. So you understand where I'm coming from when I say I was culture shocked. I was very much so frustrated and stressed. I felt so much anxiety because I was just not used to being a Black person in a sea of milk. Like that's really how I like to explain it. So it definitely was a hard transition. And coming out of Auburn to the dairy industry that I worked in, and then now Clemens, it did not get any better. So I would say definitely hard transition, but I never lost sight of who I was, and I always found Black people that I felt like I could link to. Sometimes I think you just need somebody to connect you back to your roots, and so it was always just very important for me to find people who were like me, and that we could understand the struggle together.
Hmm. Rochelle, because I know you also left Dell State and you went to Virginia Tech.
Yeah, so definitely you can experience that culture shock, those racial anxieties, going from DSU, going out to the hills of Blacksburg, Virginia, where there are not a lot of people that look like you. But I always have told people that my HBCU experience, and you, Dr. Meredith, shaped who I was and prepared me for those real world experiences. I feel like my time at DSU told me and showed me who I was so that no matter what room I stepped in, nobody else could tell me that. I always felt like my experiences at DSU put me at the tables that I'm supposed to be at, so that when I'm at a table out here in this corporate culture, nobody can tell me to get up because that's their seat, because that's my seat. And I earned that seat and I have every right to be there. And I feel like those knowledge experiences and knowledge construction, those having conversations back and forth, at DSU, they shape me for the conversations that, are to be had in the corporate culture, and how to articulate myself and make my point known and not have my voice muted. And so, I love what everyone has shared here, and culture shock is real. And Jania touched a little bit on code switching. That's a real thing too. But that
Very
mental health side of that is also very real, because what we don't realize is just how mentally taxing having to switch on and off between who we truly are, and having to switch that up when we step into a different environment because we have racial anxiety, or because we're afraid of stereotype threat, where we're thinking that we're going to confirm what everybody else feels about Black people, or things of that nature. And so, but like I always say, this HBCU experience, take advantage of any and everything that comes your way, because it will shape you and prepare you for the environment that you'll step into outside of it.
You know what? Something that just hit me, and I've never actually talked about this before, um, but because I'm kind of opposite than Jania and Lashida. Like I grew up in the suburbs. I was always immersed um, around people that didn't look like me, right? But my father graduated from Dell State in 1969, so he was a proud alum. He was the national president, and so it was no choice but for his boys that was the only institution that we were going to start out at, right? So it was crazy that when I finally got to graduate school in Illinois, like that was the first time I ever experienced racism. And it was crazy because I'll never forget, it was a block building, 4 apartments. I was the only African American there. And just people upstairs, like, I think he was like an aviation major. But so that I wouldn't get my lease renewed, they would lie. They would call the office and say all kinds of ignorant stuff. I had all these big parties. It was just crazy. And that was the first time that it took me a while. It took me years to get to a place of being back to who I was as far as how I was raised. I was raised that you don't see color. So yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. What about, I'm gonna go to answer the same question to Jordan and then Latisse, because you guys left Dell State and then you went straight into corporate. So Jordan?
I will say, going into corporate straight from Dell State, I'm not gonna lie to you, it was like depressing at first. Because I'm a well polished man now, but Alex would tell you back at Dell State, I was a little different. All right. So when I got into corporate America, I always knew how to handle myself well. I always know how to speak. That was like a gift of mine. Like speaking to people has always been a gift of mine. And I'm in sales now because I'm very good at talking. So I got there, and nobody looked like me. Nobody's my age. Everybody was older than me. Um, so it was very awkward, and like like to adjust to an environment, to like their humor, to the way they speak, the way they relate to the world, and being the only one that is like basically a rock in this river. It was very very weird. I didn't like it. It took about 6 months for me to just put my big boy pants on and just all right, this is the situation you're in. This is how you handle it. Um, Always be true to yourself and keep rolling. So, for example, when I got the True Green, everybody was super friendly, but I would get compliments if I came in with a haircut. I'd get compliments like, "Oh, P Diddy's got nothing on you." Like stuff like that is what you would have to deal with going into corporate America, and nobody looks like you because they don't know how to relate to you. You know how to relate to them. So the humor alone just didn't tickle me at all. So I would come in and you would have random people tell me, Jordan, I used to have an afro back in the day. You want to see a picture? And it's like, I don't have an afro, bro. I like waves. I do waves, right? And I know what that means to the culture, but guess what? I'm here brushing 100 times a day. You can't relate to me through an afro picture, okay? That stuff like that was the worst because you would have to keep a smile on that code switching instead of saying, Nick, I don't give a damn about your afro. All right, I came to work. Let's have a good day, right? I would have to say, "Oh, that's cool. Let's see," right? Because I didn't want any trouble in the workplace, right? Until 6 months from then, I was just like, "Look, Nick, that's not how we relate. Like, what did you do last night, right? Did you have dinner last night? What you have? You like steak? I like steak. We started to talk about things that were mutual to, I mean, not, I want to say mutual. What's the word I'm looking for? It just took the color out of things. I just took the color out of every conversation in that branch, and eventually, I was I was offered a management position on the service side, on the sales side, and then also with a business development rep position. And the reason was because how I handled it. I basically changed the culture in my branch. So
Mm.
then not to be long winded, I took a position in York, Pennsylvania. And I, you remember I called you, I was in York, Pennsylvania. And that was the first time I went and I had people in the company pull me aside because we went to a conference. They said, Jordan, look, you're going to York, Pennsylvania. I suggest you don't go to these towns right here. Don't go to this town after this time. You are not safe there. They won't respect you in these places. And I still went because I'm me and I'm headstrong. And I was like, all right, well, let's go with this uncomfortable. I'm not going to step down from this challenge. So I took the branch, I blew it up, but I will say the experience there was crazy. I would go in the diners, they'd be quiet when I walked in. All right. First time I ever experienced that, like you could really hear a fork drop on the plate when I walked in. I never forget. It was called the White Horse Diner in Thomasville, Pennsylvania. And I went in there to get a breakfast sandwich, and you can hear all the conversation stopped as soon as I walked in. Every conversation stopped to the point where I just ordered a coffee. I didn't even feel comfortable ordering food anymore. And I was there for 2.5 years. So going straight into corporate America and that code switching and that like tolerating the environment you don't want to be in, you be very mindful for that. All right, always be yourself. When you arrive, like Rochelle said, Rochelle said you arrive as yourself always. Right, don't go through what I did. Like I took more than I should have. Okay, I didn't understand corporate America at first because I was there. You got to relate to a lot of different people, and there's not a lot of people that look like you, especially in my situation. Like I said, when I took that York position, there was 12 managers. I was the only black guy. Everybody else was a white male. So just the humor alone, I couldn't relate. Just what they did for fun, I couldn't relate. How they dressed, I couldn't relate. Everything, I just couldn't relate. It was a real uncomfortable situation for a long time. So I just had to share that with you guys.
You're fine. My thing was, and I'm sorry that it cut in, but I had to. I don't know, maybe because what you said, but it's the same thing that's happened to me, right? So July 4th, I was at my homegirl's house. They're all, they're Caucasian,
Hmm.
and there was a new young man that was over playing with her nephew. They're in high school, and so I had on like the same like little gold bangles or whatever short set. And so the young man had enough nerve when I walked in and said, "Hey y'all, here comes Jay-Z." And you talking about code switch the other way? I had to fight myself not to code switch because I'm thinking like who just disrespects an adult like that, number one. And then
Right.
when I was just coming back from Dallas, the guy, like at the TSA section, he goes through all his little thing. He's looking at my ID. He's like, "Yeah, in your ID, you look just like Kanye West." And I
Oh yeah.
just smiled because I'm thinking, what can you say when you're trying to get on a plane? Like you're already marked as, potentially the angry black man. But to answer your question, Jordan, as far as what you were trying to get through, research shows that in ways to break that barrier between people that don't look the same is definitely to find commonality in values, morals, and ethics. If you can do those three things, yeah, you can definitely break that. Latisse?
Yeah, for me, I'm gonna just tell you two different experiences because when I entered corporate America, although the organization I entered in with was not Black owned, it was Black operated. So majority of the people I worked with looked like me, in some only by skin color, right? But the biggest thing that I learned in that particular experience is that our community is not monolithic. We're not all the same. Everyone's experiences and backgrounds are very different, and being able to be with your community and have your point of view while still being professional, is even in itself something that's different and unique. So as we look at today's world where we as a community are rising back up, as the Black Renaissance is happening with all of our Black owned companies really finding opportunities, growing rapidly, and bigger companies are looking at smaller companies that are Black led, Black owned to help them, right? It's like the opportunities in that space are there, but there's a different type of challenge once you get there of coming together and having your own perspective being positioned to white America in some shape or form without being that token one voice, right? And I think that for me, that was what my experience was in that in my first directly coming out of college. Is like I actually was blessed to be in an environment with people that look like me, but learning how to like listen to everyone's voice and have everyone's voice heard in that sense, and making sure that when we are representing the Black community, we're representing majority of the people that live in the Black community, because we're not all the same. So that for me is like something that I think in a lot of cases we had to have some closed door sessions of like, okay, no, we're not doing that, or no, we need to do this because this is an education moment for people that don't look like us, you know. So that was a different experience. Fast forward to when I went to a different company, that was a culture shock for me. When I was an associate brand manager at the time when I went to that company, and I was the most senior Black woman in that company. And that's not a senior role. That was wild in my mind, right? And a lot of that challenge came simply because of the fact that I was the most senior Black woman, and I did have authority in that sense. But I went to Bradenton, Florida, which is a community or a town that's filled with, the average age is like, I want to say 67 plus. So a lot of the people that were in my office were, you know, what we call legacy people. They've been there forever and ever. They've seen the company's names change over and over, older white males. And then you have some transplants that they're hiring from different places, but they were all predominantly white males. So you have someone that has some level of, even though some people didn't necessarily report to me, I had decision-making power in certain areas of the business. And that experience alone of trying to convince people that not only have been in the same town their entire life, something that's outside of the world, something different, teaching them that from a different perspective, from a geographic perspective, but from a background perspective, and then the age, right? I was one of the youngest people that came into a role like that. So I had to literally always like just prove myself. Like, okay, here's my idea. Well, why should we do that? Well, here's why it's gonna work. I'm like, oh, no. Here's why it's gonna work. Here's the background. Here's the funding. Even some of the cases, finding my own funding that's outside of the budget that was given, just to prove that this worked. And then when it worked, it's like, and here's what happened, you know. And this is why the business is better. And unfortunately, that's what had to happen for me to get a level of respect there. Unlike any other person that could just walk in and they see your resume and say, okay, they have some level of background, some level of success for them to be here. So I'm going to trust their judgment. Yeah, they're still going to have some wins, but I'm going to trust their judgment until they choose not to, or until they do wrong. And it was the complete opposite for me. It's like every room I had to walk in, similar to Jordan, it was some weird comments that they thought was funny. I had faux locks. They were like, oh, Medusa's in the building. And I'm like, wait, what now? Who are we talking about? And it's like, that's not humor. And they didn't think that would be offensive because they don't know, right? But for me, I nipped that stuff in the bud. Like it's no, for me, it's no smiling. Like I was hired, and this is one thing I would tell everyone on the call: you were hired for a reason. A lot of our world, whether we believe it or not, is led through Black culture. Companies are going out looking for people that look like us, simply because of our background, simply because of our different point of view, because it's money involved. It's simply put, if a company in today's generation, the generation of today, they're not necessarily loyal to brands because or companies in general, they're not loyal to brands or companies anymore. They're loyal to people that believe in things that they believe in. They're loyal to companies and people who feel that they support, who they feel that support them. So it's money. No matter what company you go to, money is the object of how that company runs is being successful. So companies now are just going out and finding people, not only just in our communities, in all communities that look like us, simply because it makes their business better. So be yourself, bring your own POV. And in the moment that you feel disrespected or feel slighted or feel that someone's not being conducive of your mental state of mind, or just it rubs you the wrong, it's okay to say something respectfully back. Like, hey, that's not how I would like to be addressed. This was inappropriate. And here's why. Hey, I'm not the only person that may watch Real Housewives in here. You can ask other people. And I love what Jordan said. It's like changing the narrative of like, okay, I may also listen to hip hop and R&B, but what do you listen to? What's something that we can connect on and have a separate conversation about that's for unique to you and I? And ultimately, that's what I had to learn of like, one, I'm here for a reason. Be myself. There's no need for me to have to like align to what this culture is. They brought me in here for a reason, to shake some stuff up, right? Two, it's like when you feel disrespected, don't hold it in. Like, speak to them, directly speak to them. And that's warning number one. I already told you I don't like that, right? And I want you to be open enough. If I say something to you that was bad to you, say that to me. Let's have this open line of communication, because I'm not perfect either, And then three is like, I forgot who said it before. It's like, you have to work your butt off. Like, unfortunately, we are literally always going to be questioned at all times. And it's like, you have to
You
be
have to be
better
on
than
your
the rest.
business.
Yeah. And when you are the proof's in the pudding. After that, it's nothing else they could say. You know what I mean? So my experiences are unique in a sense of, I've had an opportunity to be in an organization that was predominantly all Black, and I've had an opportunity to be in an organization that's predominantly all white, and there were challenges in both that I had to learn and take away to move forward.
And at the end of the day, Jayla, the link is in the chat in the beginning at the top. So I think, and you just really hit on something, Latisse, when you said that you got to be 2 to 3 times better. It's for the simple fact that when I moved into the role that I had before this, can you guys just hold just 1 second? Because something I think happened. And maybe it didn't. Oh, wow. There's been a lot. This is captions. This is links. Yeah, it's sitting right here at the top, but I'll put it in again. So my thing is this, where you just hit a chord with me on, does everybody have it? The survey link? I just need a yes or a no before I turn the screen back. Okay. So my thing is that when I first moved into this role, when you're a recruiter, you have no numbers, you have no job, right? And so we all know that agriculture is the most undiversified field, not just field, but yeah, it is. And so one thing is that uh, when I started at Dell State, that was my job, was to recruit ag majors, natural resources, and human ecology as well. And so it was crazy because there were no African American ag educators in the state of Delaware, right? And on top of that, this is on top of that, it's a HBCU. So I had to prove myself up and down the state. I mean, up and down the state. Did I find commonality with ag educators? I definitely did. Do I have friendships with some of them? Yes, I do. But to get to the point of you have to work twice as hard, you definitely have to do it just to be respected. Um, so yeah, and then also my goal was, I definitely had a goal. My goal was, I didn't understand why there were no Black ag educators in the state of Delaware. But when I left that post, there were two, and they were both Dell State grads. So I know that my work is not in vain. Um, but moving on, because I know that we talked about a lot of different tactics and strategies from that transition. Mainly, uh, the number one tactic that I would have to tell you would definitely be to prepare early and to make sure that you're doing internships to immerse yourselves in different cultures and cling to mentor, cling to a mentor that that's in the field that is doing what you want to do in the future. Okay, and this is actually the last slide. And these are some of the things that they promote. Better Up promotes as far as DEI and change in the workplace. Anything from like being ally, promote allies, pay it forward, lead the charge, gain perspective. And I almost believe that they took it from a scope of being in management. And so when Miss King mentioned about being accountable, that's why I started talking, because that was my number one thing that I said. Where on this slide is the measurements that a manager would go up against, showing how they retain somebody that is from a diverse background? Where is the accountability? You know what I'm saying? So honestly, I believe that there needs to be some type of rubric or panel that each individual that is going up into a management or supervisory position should have to meet those types of merits. So my question is, do you feel these strategies would be effective if mandated in every organization within the workforce to improve DEI work? And so I'm wondering, what are you thinking, Lashida?
Definitely, I think if mandated, but like you said, that accountability piece, right? Like, are we holding our team members accountable for, you know, upholding these guidelines? And if not, what if? Like, does it include termination if it gets that severe? So that accountability piece, I would definitely say is the biggest factor here.
Okay. Rochelle?
Yeah, I think that these are definitely acceptable and implementable. Again, with consistency and with intentionality, I think that these are very relevant. And I also think I would add, it may fit into one of these a little bit, but I think knowing our own biases individually, us as people of color, but also, this applies to the people that we work with in the workforce. But if we know our own, we know how to respond in certain situations. We know how to counter that stereotype threat or that stereotype image that people may have of us, and are able to perhaps facilitate conversations a little better going forward.
Okay. Jordan?
Definitely think this is acceptable. Um, to piggyback off of what Shelly said, my company, right, when it comes to retention now, I'm in management. I am now graded on my retention of employees. All right. And that means we all are now. And we have a survey in the middle of the year and at the end of the year, and when you actually get to speak about your experience with your manager, and it's anonymous. Um, so, for example, this year we didn't observe Juneteenth as a federal holiday. All right. So through that survey, it will now be observed. So with things like this, when you incentivize it with just not only because it's a culture change, like Ms. King said, right? So you have these incentives you have to knock off, but when you incentivize it and especially attach it to money and you attach it to termination, that's when all parties get involved, right? Because now you're talking about changing livelihoods. So for the people who used to ignore these things and just like, I put one foot in the pond, I did enough. My company is now putting it in front of you, and then you have to do it, right? So, in extreme cases, of course, termination. But I think it all can start with this, right, and including everybody, all types of walks of life. And like T said, not all Black people are the same, right? So, getting more than one perspective from a person of color should be incentivized as well, because we are all different. So, um, I love this, and I love the direction that this is going in. I love how you have to pay it forward, how to gain perspective, how to be an ally, how to promote allies. I love all of that, but I also love how when you incentivize it, and make it attached to monetary gain, right? How you noticed everybody starts to pay attention. If I said it well enough.
You did, Lashida.
Oh, I thought I answered.
You probably did. I told you. So, also, Jania, one thing I want to say before you answer this question. Uh, Something that you had touched on, because the previous slide we had talked about an exchange, and as far as Letice was saying, how you would go about conveying disrespect, this, that, or third. And I remember we were on a call, and I was in Acme, and you were expressing how you had to specifically learn and how you had to flip the script and say, in so many words, that what the person did hurt your feelings. You know what I mean?
So, thankfully, during my experience at Delaware State University, I was able to work as a peer counselor. And it had taught me more emotional intelligence. I feel like oftentimes us as human beings, we don't even know exactly how, we don't have the emotional intelligence to even understand how we feel to convey it to the next person. Exactly how you feel and why you felt that way. But I've definitely had to be my own advocate in a multitude of situations. My feelings being hurt, feeling, a little bit disrespected or undermined. And unfortunately, I know, I don't know. I was raised, definitely you don't want to come off aggressive or whatever the case may be. Definitely advocate for yourself, but not only do you want to make sure it's the right place, it's the right time, it's the right message. And the right medium as well. Like, you don't want to send it through an email or a text message or the phone. Like, you want to make sure you have your message on how whoever made you feel. You want to make sure it's the right medium, the right mode, the right tone, place, time, and all of that to make sure that your message gets across and everything, when you feel like you have been wronged in the workplace. And to touch base on this, one more thing that I would just add is like having I don't want to say family because it shouldn't be that personal in the workplace, but everyone should have a certain level of oneness in the office. Like in my office, we do have a small office. So I personally know Joe. I personally know Emily. Like, I'm pretty sure, it may, because we actually know each other and we take the time and everything. Like, I think I have learned my white colleague Joe enough to understand, like, we all might, because of how we were raised and everything, like, I might say something that may offend him just based off of how I was raised, because I have stereotypes and stuff with myself growing up in a predominantly Black society, just the same as he does, just the same as Emily does. She was adopted, so on and so forth. I feel like having that, when you don't really know someone, that's when everything is like, it hits you a certain type of way. When you genuinely have that, you could say, like, Joe might have said something that was a little bit like offhand, but I genuinely know this person. We have a genuine bond throughout the office. And that also sets a better stage for if I was to come to Joe and tell him, hey, Joe, that really hurt my feelings when you said A, B, C, and D. I took it this type of way. And I think it would allow Joe to be able to receive what I'm saying well without him coming defensive and everything. So not only having the accountability, having the incentives, but also having that culture again where people can feel comfortable enough to talk to one another, because just as well as it's uncomfortable receiving that you offended someone, is also uncomfortable sometimes, telling someone that they made you feel some type of way. You don't want to look overly sensitive or whatever. So I think it's just something that we're going to have to continue to work towards. I don't think it's going to happen overnight, but if we all continue to do it together, then I do think as a whole, organizations will be more inclusive and equitable.
And Latisse?
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with this slide in a sense that I'm actually experiencing a lot of this. Our company, similar to, I forget who just said it, but it's a part of my review. And anyone who has managerial or decision-making power in our organization, it's a part of them as far as the people. But even if you don't have anyone that reports to you or any final decision-making power, it's also on your review, right? In a sense of, are you hiring or working with people in a sense that is open, similar, I want to say Janaya just said, of like, are you building community? Are you having team bonding moments that you can learn and understand those people? And you have to actually document those things on your review in order for you to get your bonus. So I think as more companies start to adapt, like it being mandatory, um, it creates a different level of culture. Another thing is that's not necessarily listing here, but a lot of more companies are bringing ERGs, which stands for Employee Resource Groups, into their organizations, which are, for lack of better terms or for relatability, it's like, think of organizations on campus, so like a SGA or a fraternity, sorority, whatever the case may be. They're smaller organizations that live within your company. So for us, for the Black community, it's called Build, Blacks United in Leadership and Development, where you have a safe space to talk about whatever you need to talk about, your triumph, your bad stuff that's happening. That's another group that can fight for you if you don't have the voice to fight for yourself. And then also like just fellowship and creating point 5 and 6 allies, both within your community and allies outside of your community. I'll tell you one story in that organization I was telling you about, I was in a predominantly white institute or predominantly white company. My direct supervisor, he was a white male in his 40s at the time, and he took a liking to me. Very odd. This is the first time I had that level of relationship with a white male, and he pulled me to a side one time and said, "Hey, Latisse, I'm going to give you some tips in presenting as well as your delivery as a white male. And once you start implementing some of these things, people will start to look at you differently." And he kind of had this perspective of like, you're a Black woman in corporate America. And I've seen this because of what I've been through, how Black women in corporate America are received. I've been in those rooms where people are talking, and I don't want that to happen to you. And he pulled me to the side, and I was like, well, that was left field, but I appreciate it. And I received it very well because he was coming from a place of being genuine and authentic and just wanted to see me win. And when you have people like that in your corner, no matter what their background is, making them an ally because they're going to be able to speak for you when you're not there in that room. And the more people that we have an opportunity to meet like that, and for you to pay it forward and be a person for someone behind you or coming up that you see growth or you see them growing in some shape or form, the more the culture will change, especially in corporations and things of that nature. So a lot of this I've been experiencing it, and seeing not only the company I'm with, but some of my friends who are in other companies, and seeing that it's been mandated so that their culture is completely changing is it's appreciative. The last bullet that from the last slide of like a lot of the Black community is still in the entry level, mid level positions. That's still true. And you do see some companies growing and bringing in people in waves, and that's how other Black people come into those worlds. But it's still a lot of work to happen. But if everyone can like simply hold hands, be understanding, and take responsibility, I think that the culture can continue to change with time. It's not going to be perfect, but it'll get there with time.
Mm-hmm. And what you said is definitely definitely true. And the only other question I have, because the students, sometimes I like to make sure that they have something that they can take with them. You will have to scroll all the way up to the chat, and that's not no shade, but there is a link that talks about DEI resources. for students. But I'm more curious, since everybody on the call has been in the workforce, are there any DEI resources that either if you've used them or not, that you might have just seen that you've like, took note of, like, okay, maybe I might use that. Maybe I might tell a friend. Rochelle?
Yeah, so when I was working in extension with 4-H youth, before my current position, we actually did it's time we had the talk series for teens to have conversations about cultural awareness and race and identity and things of that nature. And so one of the resources that came in handy was King County, which is in Washington State, has amazing resources about belonging, having difficult conversations, mostly geared towards the workplace, but they are able to be tweaked for students and however else. So I'll share the link to that in the chat. And then the consulting firm that I'm doing some work with now, Dieta Jones, has some great resources on their blog as well. So I can drop that in the chat too.
Rashida?
Sorry, I was on mute. I don't necessarily have any resources, but I would say where you can encourage the conversation. So just recently we've had our BRG network of women have a talk, which is just talking about cultural biases. So where you can bring that to the table if your company doesn't already have something like that.
Miss King?
Yeah, I don't have any right off the top of my head. I would just encourage each of you to do research once you begin working for an organization. They should have like a civil rights, diversity, inclusion office. For example, within my agency, we have a host of different programs, although they aren't like your actual position. But if you want to get involved in diversity and inclusion, but we are STEM majors and everything, you can always pick up a collateral duty. For example, we have special emphasis program managers, which focus on minority groups and making sure that they are properly represented based on the census and all of that good stuff. So I would just say I don't have anything right off the top of my head, but make sure that you do research, because even if your position may not have something directly to do with civil rights, diversity, equity, and inclusion, they may have opportunities for you to volunteer, collaborate on outreach and these type of initiatives.
And last but not least, Miss Hickson?
I would just say LinkedIn. At this point, I should work for them because the resources that they have on LinkedIn is beyond measure. I know, like the free version, you could type in their search bar. They have LinkedIn Learnings, and I think it's called LinkedIn Learnings as far as that toggle at the top. Anything, not even just DEI, anything that you can think of that you may have heard in a class or that you may be interested in. I know in school you never really always know what you want to get into until you really know. So even that exploratory of like different avenues and what you want to like learn about, it's on LinkedIn. I know the premium, they have a premium version of it that is discounted for students. So take advantage of that while you can. But type in DEI, a laundry list of videos, tests, certifications will pop up for you to be able to do that. And to be honest, going back to what Dr. Meredith said, so many companies are looking for DEI officers, and those positions aren't necessarily filled, but they're developing departments around those things. And it's like when you have those certifications, that makes you one, the ability to get into those roles, but two, if you don't even want to go directly into that, it adds a little bit of an extra oomph on your resume to know that you've been trained in this prior to going into the workforce. So I would say use LinkedIn just in general for anything that you may be curious about. They have videos, they have tests, they have certifications for you to do some pre-work before you jump into the real world.
Cool. And I do have to say this because I have been off my game. So you guys notice, like throughout this whole thing, I've been sharing. So I've not been able to see anybody because I was just sitting there. I was like, well, what is wrong with me? Because this has never happened before. And I'm like, you don't see any of the cubes at the top. Okay, so it makes sense. But I did want to open it up to the students that are still here. Do you guys have any questions for the panelists? I know Tiffany Oliver has one. Tiffany, you still here?
Yeah, I'm still here.
You don't,
Um,
you don't have a question? You usually have good questions.
yeah, I was really listening to everything that all y'all were saying because I had an internship at Ross, and Ross is predominantly white, and my team was diverse, and I kind of went in thinking like, I'll be able to relate to somebody, but I really couldn't, and I really felt like what Jordan was saying about, trying to be authentic, but it's really hard when they're thinking, they gotta relate to you on these topics, and it's like, no, like just relate to me as a person. Like
Mm.
don't look at me as like, just my race essentially. And it's draining having to put on that mask and then having to come home and take it off and then just go back to work the next day and put it on. And like Miss Hickson was saying about, they want you to be authentic. I went in, I gave them my honest opinion on some of the stuff they were doing. Like, I was a buyer, so my buyer who I was working under, she had bought like a bunch of Juneteenth pajamas and they did horrible. And I was telling her, like, this is not something that I feel like our community really values in a pajama. Like a Juneteenth nightshirt is not that serious. And she wasn't really listening to me. And I talked to a lady there who was a VP. She was from Baltimore. She was black. It was great. And she was telling me, girl, like, look, she's not going to trust you because you're an intern. Like, what you're saying has value. Don't stop saying it. But, you know, she might shut you down a little bit here and there because you are new. Even though you're black, and our target audience for the department I was buying in, like they have a different separate store that's majority Hispanic and black. You would think she would listen to me, but she wouldn't. And it kind of just made me want to shut off my opinion. Like, I'm telling you, I'm the insight here for you, but you don't want to listen to me. I don't want to say anything because then I feel like you're kind of just shutting me down. So it is hard, and I really don't know how to navigate in those situations and find that balance of like giving my insight and then keeping my insight and then giving her the real and then just letting her do what she wants to do. Because I don't think everybody in that position working for a certain company really values the I don't think they really value the job as much as they just value getting paid. So as long as she's getting paid, it doesn't really matter what she's buying. She's still gonna have a job anyway. I'm out here trying to increase their bottom line to the point where I feel like I can't relate to my boss because she's kind of power tripping, not really hearing what I'm saying, not really valuing that. But I'm just trying to help. So I don't know what to do in situations like those, to be honest.
So, if I can, Mr. Meredith, what I would say is come to the table with the facts, come to the table with the data, come to the table with the research. Um, I'm no stranger to what you faced. In fact, when I very first started my master's degree at Virginia Tech, I was told I was a George Washington Carver Scholar, which meant that I was there on a full scholarship to receive my master's degree, in addition to working as a graduate research assistant. And I was told by a white student that I was nothing more than a number, and I was there for nothing other than to fill a quota as a black student. No talking was necessary because what ended up happening, I was a master's student, she was a doctoral student. So we were on two different levels at that point. But so for her to say something like that, it was like, okay, I got you. So what ended up happening was when it came time for research conferences, submitting research proposals, I was that one who was putting in the work to prove my worth. I didn't have to say anything. I didn't have to tell you, this is why I deserve whatever. I came to the table with the facts and the research. I was the one getting accepted to the most prominent research conferences. She wasn't. And so I say that to say the numbers, the data, the paperwork, that's going to be what speaks. If they start to try to shut your voice down, if you come to the table with the facts, they'll never turn you away with that.
Most definitely. And also just make sure in any argument, professional or personal, take out the emotion. Take out the emotion. And also, Miss King, like she was talking about, in the field, like as far as work, and somebody sets you off via email, take 24 hours before you respond. You know what I mean? Or respond once things are settled. So, Miss King, you had your hand up.
Yes, I definitely empathize with you so much. I'm currently going through some of the things that you're facing right now. And I would say, like, when it comes down to a supervisor that, may not be as motivated and driven and stuff as you are, um, really, the reality is, like, sometimes all you can do is your job. Like, you can
Mhm.
do and just make sure you send an email, make sure everything is followed up, just like Rochelle said, have the data, blah blah blah, and just have your stuff together. You can't worry about all. The only person you can focus on in the workplace is you. You are the only person you can change. You are the only person you can control. You can't make someone accept your you can have the best proposal in the world. You can't make someone accept it at the end of the day. So don't ever take it personal, or, like, you know, put that mental anguish, just let that pile up on you. Do the best you can do. Know that you have done the best that you can do. Make sure that you submit your best. Have everyone, CC'd or whatever, copy to the email. And after that, leave it to God. Because sometimes I feel like we just want to be so in control over stuff that we are not in control in. And that is what stresses us out and put us in these crazy states. So just keep doing you, making your decisions. Make sure everything is backed by, like Rochelle said, data. So have a nice professional email, CC everyone, and after that, know that you did your best.
And Miss Hickson.
Yeah, I completely agree with both of the women who just spoke. Corporate clapback is legitimately a thing, and there's a way to do it with data, with the tone of voice. Once again, the medium of what you say, and once just being yourself. I know that it's not going to always work out, but in the long run, it will. I literally was cheesy today and wore my shirt that says "Be you." They will adjust. They will adjust. They will literally adjust to who you are as long as you are your best polished self.
Hmm.
And for me, in that, you just hit a nerve, Tiffany, because Juneteenth as a conversation, we all saw, I hope everyone saw this year in the media where there were so many companies that did the wrong thing. And for you moving forward, there's an opportunity to say, hey, here's, like you said, you spoke and said, hey, I don't think this is a good idea. But once it's passed, and all them articles about Walmart and Dollar Tree and all these people doing the wrong execution of Juneteenth, that was a huge opportunity for you to kindly email and say, hey, I love the conversation we were having. My point of view still remains the same, and here's some articles that came out post Juneteenth for next year's execution of the holiday. And that's an opportunity for you to once again show that you're doing your job, and it's not just based off your opinion. It's based off of research and your background and your upbringing. So listen, know that corporate clapback is legitimately a thing, and it's a way to do it, so a time to do it, and it's in when you do it, you feel good that your point was pulled across, but it was professional. You're
And this
not
is
saying you
I was
silly,
gonna say, they're
but
already
it's a professional.
expecting you to come off like
Right.
something that they saw on TV. So, being professional is right. Making sure you do your homework is right. Making sure that Latisse had mentioned. I guess I'm getting my second win, but Latisse had mentioned, how pretty much companies are coming and they're seeking out people of color because we are extremely innovative, right? If you are always either ostracized or not included, you start to run your own race. And while you do it, it looks nothing like somebody else's race, right? And so that means that a lot of times innovation is created that way. So make sure that you always have your stuff together because honestly, if you do it the right way one time, you'll never have to address it again.
Mhm.
You'll never have to address it again. And that's happened to me plenty of times. Because 9 times out of 10, not only the way that you come across, but also what you provide is in the point of that outside the box. Oh, I didn't think of that. Okay, and everybody's been in school, right? And so then all of a sudden we find out who's the smart kid. So we kind of either want to cheat off his paper or we just want to try to get to know him a little bit. That's what ends up happening afterwards. So the hard work is definitely worth it. Did anybody else have anything else to say?
I just had kind of an add to that. Really, it's just a show and prove mentality for me. I just don't feel that there's any need to address anything. You show what you have, and it'll prove them wrong. Like that's really the baseline of it. For me, going to Auburn, similar as Rochelle, as a Black student coming in from an historically Black college, I felt like my opinion wasn't valid. My research wasn't valid until I was winning and showing, Auburn that I was really proving, that I'm a good researcher. I know my worth, and that's all you have to do.
I know that's right. All right, well, to close
You
this
guys
out.
so much.
Sorry, somebody else say something?
No, I just want to say thank you because, like, yeah, I really appreciate everything everybody was saying.
Anytime, anytime.